Good afternoon, dear listener. Welcome to a journey through shadows and light, a story of sacrifice, vengeance, and love set against the roar of revolution. This is Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, one of the most haunting and unforgettable novels ever written. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Novel Whisper Official, and comment below the title of the novel you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. The year is 1775. The world trembles on the edge of change, though most do not yet see it. In France, whispers of rebellion stir in taverns and markets, voices muttering against a nobility that feasts while peasants starve. The old order stands tall like a crumbling statue, cracked and brittle, yet still heavy upon the backs of the poor. Across the Channel in England, things are calmer. But beneath the polite chatter of London society, there lies a deep unease, an uncertainty about what the future will bring. On a cold, fog-wrapped night, a coach rumbles along a lonely English road. Its horses snort and strain as wheels groan against the mud. The passengers inside are tense, for the roads are haunted by highwaymen who strike without mercy. The darkness outside feels alive, pressing in, the rattling coach like a fragile bubble of safety in a sea of danger. Suddenly the driver halts. A figure looms in the mist, a messenger carrying urgent words for one of the passengers. His name is Jarvis Lorry, a banker from Tellson's, and his mission is as mysterious as it is grave. The message he receives is simple, chilling, almost cryptic. Wait at Dover for Mamselle, recalled to life. Recalled to life. The words linger like an echo in a tomb. What could they mean? As the coach resumes its journey, Laurie dozes, and in his restless sleep he dreams of the dead rising from graves, skeletal hands reaching through the earth, spirits summoned to walk among the living. He dreams of one face in particular, a man long thought gone, lost to the dungeons of the Bastille, Dr. Alexandre Manette. Dr. Manette's story has been all but erased by time, buried in the silence of his imprisonment. Once a brilliant physician in Paris, he had vanished without explanation, swallowed by the fortress walls of the Bastille, and left to rot in darkness for 18 long years. To the world he was dead. But now, perhaps not. At Dover, Laurie meets a young woman with golden hair and gentle eyes, Lucie Manette. She has grown up believing her father was gone forever, taken before she could remember his touch or hear his voice. Raised by guardians, she has carried his absence like a wound, softened only by hope. And now she is told her father lives, though broken, and it falls upon her to bring him back from the shadow of his past. Together, Laurie and Lucie travel to France, through villages scarred by hunger and ruled by arrogance. They pass noble carriages that splash mud upon barefoot peasants, watch tax collectors take the last coin from a widow's palm, hear the quiet growls of discontent that will one day become thunder. It is a land suffocating beneath injustice, but also simmering with the promise of reckoning. In Paris, their path leads to a wine shop kept by Monsieur and Madame Defarge. The shop bustles with laughter and chatter, but beneath the surface it is no ordinary tavern. The Defarges are not simply innkeepers, they are keepers of secrets, leaders of whispers, and their patrons are more than customers. They are revolutionaries in waiting, their names silently recorded in Madame Defarge's knitting, each loop of yarn a death sentence yet to be carried out. Here, in a hidden upper room, they find Dr. Manette. At first, he is unrecognizable. Bent, frail, his hair white as ash, his hands tremble as they work endlessly at a shoemaker's bench. His eyes are hollow, staring past the present into a void of memory. He murmurs not as a doctor, but as a prisoner who has forgotten his own name. The years have stripped him of identity, leaving only reflex, the ceaseless crafting of shoes, the trade he clung to in captivity as his mind's last fragile anchor. Lucie's heart breaks at the sight of him, yet she does not falter. She kneels beside him, takes his withered hands in her own, and speaks with a voice that carries warmth into his frozen soul. "Father, it is your daughter, Lucie. You are not alone anymore." Slowly, painfully, a flicker of recognition stirs within him, a spark of life buried deep. The old man blinks as if seeing light after centuries of darkness, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, he dares to believe he is loved. With patient devotion, Lucie coaxes him back toward himself, her presence a candle in the endless night of his mind. He clings to her voice, to the sound of her heartbeat, to the tears she sheds upon his shoulder. The banker Laurie watches in silence, knowing that this fragile reunion is only the beginning of a greater story. For what has been stolen cannot be easily restored, and the world beyond their small circle is shifting, grinding toward upheaval. As they prepare to leave Paris and return to London, the air itself seems heavy with foreboding. In the streets, the people drink spilled wine from the ground like beasts, their mouths stained red as if in rehearsal for the blood to come. In the shadows, Madame Defarge's knitting needles click and whisper. A storm is gathering, and though Lucie holds her father close, the world around them is marching toward fire. And so begins this tale of 2 cities, 2 fates, and 2 destinies entwined, where love and sacrifice will rise against vengeance and tyranny, and where the line between life and death, freedom and despair, will be drawn upon the guillotine's edge. The road back to London is long, but in Lucie's heart there is a strange blend of sorrow and hope. She has her father beside her at last, but he is fragile, like a man only half awake. At night he mutters to himself, slipping into fragments of memory from the Bastille. His fingers twitch as if shaping invisible shoes. Sometimes, when startled, he recoils like a prisoner hearing the turn of a key. Yet when Lucie speaks softly, when her hand brushes his hair, something human glows faintly behind his haunted eyes. In London, within a modest home sheltered by quiet streets, Dr. Manette slowly begins to find himself again. The shoemaker's bench is brought along, for he cannot part with it. It is both a symbol of his suffering and the fragile thread that kept his mind from snapping entirely. Often he retreats to it, working in silence, but under Lucie's watchful presence, these spells grow shorter. Her love is like sunlight breaking through clouds, and she tends to him with patience that neither demands nor rushes. As father and daughter rebuild their bond, the outside world presses closer. Across the Channel, Paris groans beneath hunger and fury, while in London the weight of political suspicion hangs in the air. Tellson's Bank, where Mr. Laurie works, thrives on discretion, guarding the secrets of men who live in fear of exposure. Secrets are currency, and the city is rich with them. It is within this atmosphere of distrust and suspicion that Charles Darnay steps into the light. Handsome, refined, with the bearing of a gentleman, he seems out of place in the crowded courtroom where he stands trial for treason. The accusation is severe, that he has betrayed England by secretly passing information to the French. The evidence is thin, but the air is thick with hostility. In those days, suspicion alone was nearly enough to condemn a man to death. The courtroom hums with tension. Lawyers sharpen their words like blades. Witnesses stumble through oaths and half-truths. At the center of it all sits Darnay, pale but composed, his fate balanced upon the whims of strangers. Watching in the gallery, Lucie feels her chest tighten. She has only just begun to know her father again. Is she now to lose another man who has shown her kindness? The case is dire until a strange twist occurs. The defense attorney points out the uncanny resemblance between Darnay and one of the men present in the courtroom. A lawyer himself, with tired eyes and a disheveled cravat. His name is Sydney Carton. The resemblance throws the prosecution's testimony into doubt. How can witnesses be so certain of Darnay's identity if another man looks so very like him? In this sliver of uncertainty, Darnay is saved. The verdict? Acquittal. Relief floods the room, though Darnay's freedom is not greeted by cheers, but by quiet exhalations. Yet for Lucie, who had sat trembling as if the blade of judgment hovered over her own neck, it feels like a miracle. She does not yet know that the moment will bind her fate to both men, the noble Darnay and the wasted Carton, in ways more profound than she can imagine. After the trial, life moves with deceptive calm. Darnay, grateful and humbled, grows closer to Lucie and her father. He carries with him a shadow of secrecy, for he is not only a man of England but a man of France, tied by blood to the aristocracy that still grinds the poor into dust. Yet his soul rejects their cruelty, and he longs to build a life away from their corruption. With Lucie, he sees the promise of peace, of love untainted by the sins of his lineage. Carton, meanwhile, lingers in the background. Brilliant yet broken, he wastes his talent in wine and cynicism, living as if already defeated. And yet, when he looks at Lucie, something stirs within him. Not hope for himself, for he believes redemption is beyond his grasp, but a wish to protect her happiness, even if it must come through another man's arms. In the evenings, the Manette's home becomes a haven. Dr. Manette, slowly strengthening, leans on his daughter's laughter. Darnay visits often, his words carrying gentleness. And Carton, though rough in manner, finds himself drawn again and again into their circle, though he never admits why. But while London offers moments of warmth, France sinks deeper into shadow. In Paris, the wine shop of the Defarges thrums with quiet purpose. Men gather in its corners, whispering names, plotting futures. Madame Defarge, stern and unyielding, sits near the window with her knitting. To any stranger, she seems absorbed in her work, looping and tying threads, yet each loop is a name, each knot a judgment. She is weaving a register of death, a tapestry of vengeance that grows longer with each passing day. One afternoon in a narrow Paris street, a cask of wine shatters. It spills across the cobblestones, and people rush forward like starving animals, scooping the liquid into their hands, staining their mouths and faces red. They laugh, they lick the stones, they drink as if possessed. But when the wine is gone, the street is silent and the stains remain. It is a vision of what is to come. Blood flowing where wine once did, hunger turning to violence, the people tasting vengeance for the first time. Back in London, Lucie sometimes feels the weight of distant thunder. She knows nothing of politics, yet a chill runs through her when she sees her father pacing, haunted by dreams of prison. In those moments, he seems again like the man she first found in the upper room above the Defarges' shop, lost, fragile, whispering in despair. She wonders if the shadow of France still clings to him, if the past can ever be fully left behind. The answer will come, though not in peace. For destiny is already moving, and the lines between London and Paris, between love and sacrifice, between vengeance and mercy are beginning to blur. Days in London gather like pale beads on a string, gentle, orderly, and warmed by the quiet ritual of a small household teaching itself to breathe again. In Soho, where the plane tree leans over a sun-dappled courtyard, Dr. Manette begins to walk a little more firmly. He still drifts sometimes, fingers remembering the shape of a last through the echo of an empty cell. But the shoemaker's bench is no longer a prison of habit. It is a moon he visits only when the tide of memory pulls too hard. Lucie's voice turns that tide. She speaks and the tide recedes. She laughs and the shore appears. The old man looks up as though from underwater and finds her face, steadfast, golden, almost impossibly patient. Their home becomes a safe harbor for the few who navigate toward light. Mr. Lorry calls often, his neat cuffs and careful words a comfort, as if reliability itself had become a person. Miss Pross guards the doorway with the fierce loyalty of a lioness, insisting that nobody could possibly love her ladybird properly except herself, and yet in her own gruff way, she permits the right people to draw near. Among them is Charles Darnay, who visits with a reserve that speaks of self-command and an eagerness that betrays a heart already in motion. He brings stories of language and history, of quiet evenings reading, of work taken not for glory but for independence. He avoids talk of France. When the subject circles that way, a small shadow crosses his expression, as if some distant bell has tolled only for him. Sydney Carton comes too, less often, and usually when the evening has grown soft and the light is going. He enters as though he has stumbled into grace by mistake, sleeves not quite straight, eyes clouded by long, unprofitable hours. Yet something gentles in him within these walls. He sits at the edge of conversation like a man warming his hands at a fire he does not believe he deserves. When he does speak, the words are precise, the wit cutting, the self-contempt polished to a melancholy shine. On Sundays, they sit beneath the plane tree, and the city seems to hush itself to listen. A motif takes root in the house, a music of footsteps. Lucie hears them first, faint as rainfall far away. The street beyond carries the tramping of lives that will one day touch their own. Hurried boots of messengers, the slow tread of watchers, the secret shuffle of dangers coming closer. She calls them guests, these footsteps she can never see. They are on their way, she says, smiling, eyes glistening with a hope she cannot explain. To us, elsewhere another rhythm forms, the beat of planning in a Paris wine shop where the air smells of tannin and iron. Monsieur Defarge pours and listens, patient as a stone. Madame Defarge knits. Her needles click and whisper, writing a private scripture that only the initiated can read. If the London house collects gentle tread, this room gathers marching feet. The names loop and coil in her work. Vengeance has found its scribe. Back in Soho, a different sort of drama unfolds, almost comic if it were not so proud. Mr. Stryver, all self-importance and rings, announces to Sydney Carton that he will marry Miss Manette. He says it as one might say he will acquire a better carriage. Carton, who has hidden his heart in the alcoves of his wrecked ambition, shrugs as if such talk were weather. But when Stryver strides into Tellson's bank to press his boasts, Mr. Lorry, courteous and iron, quietly suggests caution. He has seen Lucie. He has listened. He has measured the temperature of her heart. It is not for Stryver. Very gently he saves the man from a public refusal, and Stryver, offended in the way of men who think the world was made to match their size, retreats, puffed up with explanations that convince only himself. That evening, after Stryver has been turned aside, Carton climbs the stairs to the Soho rooms and asks to speak to Lucie alone. Miss Pross bristles, then, reading something solemn in his face, steps away. The summer light has dwindled to a last amber seam along the roof lines. Carton stands with his hat in his hands, his mouth set as if it refuses to belong to him. He tells her he is not here to be loved, that he knows what he looks like to the world, a wasted chance, a man who has broken faith with the talents given to him, a portrait of what brilliance becomes when it stops believing in its future. His voice quivers once, then steadies. He does not ask. He confesses. Not the kind of confession that seeks absolution, but the kind that plants a seed in the dark and walks away. He says he loves her. Not with the suitor's expectation, but with the clarity of a man who has found the one thing pure enough to measure his life against. He asks her to remember him kindly, nothing more. If a day should come when someone she loves needs help beyond the ordinary power of friends, beyond any price the world would call reasonable, he wants her to know this. He would give his life, freely, quietly, as a poor replacement for the life he did not bother to live well. Lucie's eyes fill. She reaches for his hand with a tenderness that does not mistake him for a project to be mended or a prize to be won, but honors what his courage has cost. She cannot grant him the love he has offered. Her heart is already walking another path. But she gives him what she can. the promise that his words will not vanish into the air. He leaves lighter than he arrived and yet more burdened, carrying a vow that will one day become a doorway. The footsteps theme deepens. On an evening of small rain, Lucie listens again. To the street, to the stair, to the future gathering itself. This time the rhythm feels nearer, close enough to stir the curtains. Dr. Manette, who has been quietly strong for weeks, pauses in the doorway, unsettled by a sound only he can hear. The remembered shuffle of a turnkey, the iron sigh of a lock. When it passes, he puts a hand to the lintel and breathes. Lucie wraps him gently in her voice until the room belongs to them again. Charles Darnay, meanwhile, has decided he must speak to the doctor. He asks for Lucie's hand with a humility that is almost an apology to fate. Before he can be accepted, he begs permission to reveal a truth to Dr. Manette. Not tonight, not before consent is given, but on the morning of the wedding. The older man agrees, moved by the young gentleman's frankness, unaware of how that promised revelation will shake the frame of his hard-won peace. Across the channel, France learns to pronounce a single word with 100 mouths. The word is hunger, and it trains itself into rage. A nobleman's carriage slices through a narrow street. A child's cry rises. The Marquis tosses a coin, not in charity, but in contempt. Eyes burn. A tall figure melts back into the stones, watching, memorizing. Defarge locks a look with Madame, and the needles go on tireless. The register grows. In London, beneath the plane tree, the wind changes. The leaves whisper like paper turning. Mr. Lorry notices it too, a sense that the books of two cities are being opened to the same page. He thinks of ships that move outward on an ebb, unaware they will return on a flood. Miss Pross fusses at the window, declares there is nothing to worry about, then stands guard a little longer than usual. Lucie sets a lamp in the upstairs room and lingers by the stair. The house feels like a heartbeat. Within its rhythm, a future is stitching itself together. Threads of love, duty, and sacrifice drawn slowly through the fabric. No alarms, no trumpet. Only footsteps, closer now, each pair shaped by its own destiny. The loyal step, the jealous step, the step of a man who would trade himself for another. The hard, measured step of vengeance crossing water. Night gathers. The lamp burns. In one city, a woman knits. In the other, a daughter sings softly to her father until his hands grow still and his breath smooths out into sleep. Between them, the sea listens, holding its breath for the storm. The air in London thickens with late summer heat. The city pressed under clouds that promise thunder but hold it back. Inside the quiet sanctuary of Soho, plans are whispered with the weight of futures. Charles Darnay, determined yet trembling beneath the calm of his demeanor, has asked for Lucie's hand. The news, once spoken, blooms like a soft light across the household. Miss Pross declares no man on earth could possibly be worthy, yet wipes her eyes in secret. Mr. Lorry smiles with discreet pride, as though balancing another ledger, one written not in coin, but in happiness. Dr. Manette, though, hears the request with a complicated heart. His love for Lucie is boundless, his devotion absolute. Yet when he consents, his voice carries a tremor as if memory itself resists the idea of letting her belong to another. The morning of the wedding arrives. The house fills with hushed excitement, with the rustle of fabric, with Miss Pross's bustle and fuss, with Mr. Lorry's dignified presence like an uncle who never forgets his manners. The doctor walks Lucie down the path, his arm trembling slightly in hers. He is proud, but there is strain beneath his smile. For before Charles Darnay joins his life to Lucie's, he has promised to speak the truth to her father. In a quiet room, Darnay stands with resolve. He reveals his secret. He is of French blood, born into the aristocracy that bleeds the poor. He is the nephew of the Marquis Saint-Evremond, the very name that peasants curse when they spit into the dust. But he has turned his back on that poisoned inheritance, choosing exile. choosing to build an honest life in England. He hides nothing now, believing love must stand on the whole truth. For a moment, Dr. Manette does not answer. His face grows pale, his hands clutch the arm of his chair, and in his eyes flickers the ghost of the Bastille. Evrémonde. The syllables strike like hammer blows upon a half-healed wound. He says nothing of the memory it calls back, nothing of the chains and shadows that tighten around his heart. He nods faintly and blesses the union. But when the vows are spoken and the bells have chimed, when Lucie and Charles step into their new life together, Dr. Manette vanishes into his room and locks the door. For 9 long days he does not emerge. From behind the shuttered door comes the steady tap and rasp of shoemaking tools. He has fallen back into the abyss, a prisoner once more at his bench, his mind shackled by the past he had nearly outrun. Lucie pleads outside the door. Mr. Lorry waits in silence. Miss Pross weeps in rage and sorrow. But the sound continues as if Paris itself had reclaimed him. It is only on the 10th morning that the door opens and Dr. Manette steps out composed, his face pale but his voice calm, as though nothing has happened. He does not explain. He only says softly, "I am well again." Mr. Lorry, ever practical, urges the doctor to let him take the shoemaker's bench and tools away. Not in cruelty, but in mercy, for they are relics that can drag him back to chains. The doctor hesitates, his eyes shadowed with reluctance, but at last he agrees. Quietly, respectfully, Lorry burns the wood and iron, scattering the ashes. He says nothing to Lucie, who holds her father's arm and prays that his heart will never again retreat into darkness. Life steadies. The Manette's home fills with gentle laughter once more. A child is born, a little girl with eyes that mirror Lucie's, soft as morning. For a time, the world seems merciful. Charles teaches, Lucie sings. Dr. Manette grows strong, and the rhythm of footsteps outside their door feels more like the simple passage of days than the approach of fate. But fate is not idle. In France, the Marquis Saint-Evrémonde has already met his death at the hands of a peasant driven to madness by grief. His carriage had once crushed a child in the streets, and when he tossed a coin to silence the father, he did not know he was seeding vengeance. One night a shadow entered his chamber, a knife gleamed, and the tyranny of one Evrémonde ended in silence. Yet in ending, it birthed a roar. The people are rising. The Bastille itself shakes with fury, its stones crumbling beneath a tide of rage. Prisoners stagger into the light, bloodied but free, while the fortress that symbolized oppression collapses brick by brick beneath the hands of the people. Lucie cannot hear it across the sea, but in Paris the storm has begun. The streets run wild with fire, bells peal, drums thunder, and cries of liberté shake the night sky. Madame Defarge stands at the wine shop doorway, her knitting needles clicking like the ticking of a clock. With every loop she records another name, another death to come. Her face does not smile, her eyes do not soften. She watches the Bastille fall, and in her gaze there is no joy, only the cold satisfaction of justice delayed. Back in London, Sydney Carton drifts between taverns and chambers, his soul wearing thinner each day. Yet when he visits Lucie, he watches her happiness with quiet awe. She has everything he cannot hold: love, peace, the promise of a future. In her child's laugh, he hears a world worth saving, and in some unspoken corner of his heart, he already knows that his wasted life may yet find its meaning in theirs. The storm in France grows louder. Soon its thunder will cross the channel, rattling the fragile peace of Soho. And when it comes, the footsteps Lucie has long imagined will arrive, carrying with them the weight of vengeance, the pull of destiny, and the sharp gleam of the guillotine's blade. Peace arranges itself carefully in the Manette household, like porcelain on a shelf. A lamp trimmed, a shawl folded, a child's laugh threading the rooms as if stitching them to the present. In Soho's gentler streets, Charles earns his bread by teaching. preferring honest work to the jagged glitter of inherited rank. Lucie keeps a music of ordinary mercies, tea poured at the right moment, flowers in a glass, her father's arm linked with hers on evening walks beneath the plane tree. Dr. Manette's step is surer now. His gaze meets the daylight more readily. Sometimes his fingers still wander, shaping ghosts of leather and thread in the air, but the habit releases him sooner each time, as though memory itself is learning to breathe among the living. Sydney Carton comes rarely and stays briefly, like a man who does not wish to smudge a clean page. Yet whenever he is there, the room grows strangely quiet, as if it recognizes the weight of an unwritten promise. He sits a little apart, talking when spoken to, smiling without practice. Little Lucie, bright as morning water, takes a grave interest in him. She once touches the tired lines at his eyes and proclaims him good with a child's pure certainty. He bows his head as if knighted, that small verdict hushing a noise inside him he had assumed would roar forever. One evening, when the sky over London holds the last gold-like wine in a glass, Carton and Darnay walk together. The city hums its sober song, iron on stone, far-off carriage wheels, the clockwork of a place that believes itself safe. Carton asks for a favor and makes it sound like a confession. He has not behaved well toward Darnay. He has been rude out of envy he barely understood. He has spoken with the bitterness of a man who suspects he has missed his one true hour, and deserves the missing. Forgive him that, he says. Allow him, when the mood takes him, to come and go unremarked in the Manette home. Not as a friend who must be entertained, not as a burden, but as a quiet shadow permitted a place by the hearth. Darnay's answer is simple and sincere. He takes Carton's hand. Come as you please. They stand for a moment, two men the world might mistake for mirrors, yet inwardly divided by a continent of choices. Carton turns away first. If he is a mirror, he thinks, then let him catch light only to give it back. He has nothing he wishes to keep. Work swallows him again. Long nights in a lawyer's rooms where Mr. Stryver, loud and self-congratulating, declaims like a general while Carton does the map work of a campaign no one will remember he designed. The Jackal, they call him, while Stryver devours the kill. Carton takes the name without protest. Names are for men who intend to carry them into the future. He intends no such thing. Still, on certain nights, after the candles gutter and the wine runs thin, he finds his way once more to Soho, where a child's laugh can mend what drink only numbs. Lucie senses it, the braid of love and sorrow that runs through their circle. She never tries to untie it. Instead, she sets more plates, pours more tea, and lets the quiet find its shape. Dr. Manette watches Carton as a physician might watch a fever. Alert for the turn, powerless to command it. In the doctor's gaze there is no judgment, only a knowledge of what men will do and bear for those they love. Across the channel a harder music rises. In a village of chalk-white dust and thorny hedges, a tall man in a coarse blouse glides through the lanes like a rumor, then vanishes. The child run down by a noble carriage is long buried. His father, and the one who struck back with a knife in a bedroom of velvet, has been hunted, taken, and hanged. The mender of roads, who saw the swinging corpse and the stone stuffed with a brief, terrible message, tells his story in the wine shop of the Defarges. His voice is thin with awe and hatred. Around him men drink and nod. Madame Defarge's needles never pause. She enters another name into the deep grammar of her wool. Will the people bear it? Someone asks. They have borne it, Defarge answers, and that is why they will not bear it. Not long after, a stranger pushes open the shop door. Trim, polite, his gaze restless as if counting exits. He buys wine too quickly, asks too easily, smiles as though smiles were coin. He calls himself John Barsad. To the unpracticed eye, he is a traveler. To the practiced, a spy. Madame Defarge measures him with one cool glance and begins a new pattern in her knitting. Barsad does not know it, but he is caught already. Not in rope or iron, but in thread. In this city, thread is a prophecy. At Versailles, where fountains toss their white arms in the sunlight, the mender of roads is paraded with other peasants to shout blessings upon the royal family. He shouts them. He would shout anything today, for he has seen the world tipped by a hair's breadth. Defarge watches him, noting how quickly the face turns from adoration to fury and back again. A sea is learning to rise. The timing is nearly tuned. Back in London, the Manette home composes its smaller harmonies. Candles trimmed, lessons done, a lullaby hummed against a sleeping child's hair. Yet even here the wind sometimes rattles the panes. A letter arrives from France. A rumor skips like a stone. Guildhalls broken into, noble houses marked with charcoal, forged papers, arrested men. Charles reads such words with care and sets them aside with more care still. The name he renounced travels ahead of him like a contagion. He cannot stop it from infecting rooms he has sworn to keep clean. When little Lucie falls sick for a night, no more than a fever that passes with the dawn, Carton keeps vigil in a chair that creaks at every breath. He does not pray. He has not spoken to God since he was young enough to believe God would answer. He merely watches the small furrow of the child's brow smooth itself under sleep and thinks, unexpectedly, of snow falling on a crowded city. The way it makes everything briefly innocent, even the roofs of prisons. When morning ruffles the curtains, the fever is gone. Carton bows his head in a thankfulness so quiet it does not know its own name. He leaves before anyone wakes, and all day his work tastes different, like bread, less like ash. Another evening under the plane tree, Lucie tells her father that the footsteps she once imagined feel nearer. She cannot say why. Perhaps it is the way Mr. Lorry lingers longer at the door, or how Miss Pross peers twice down the street when once would do. Perhaps it is simply the air which seems charged as if a thunderhead were taking shape beyond the horizon. Dr. Manette listens, and though he smiles, a long-closed window opens in his mind, admitting a breath that smells of damp stone. He shuts it gently and kisses his daughter's hair. In Paris, Madame Defarge ties off a thread and regards what her hands have made. A patient book the law cannot seize, the registry of a justice older than courts. The name Evrémonde coils through it like a vein of iron. She does not yet know the Englishman who carries that name like a wound has married the daughter of a ghost she once knew by number. She does not need to know. The tide has its own arithmetic. It will add them together soon enough. Night descends and London sleeps. Carton, alone in his rooms, unlatches a window and lets the cool air touch his face. He raises a glass not to triumph or to numbness, but to a form of hope he hardly recognizes. That a wasted life might find its single perfect use. He does not ask how. He only keeps himself ready, a coin laid aside for the one purchase that matters. Somewhere far off, the echo of marching feet answers him, muffled for now by sea and distance, sure of the road it will take. Paris groans like a wounded beast, each day heavier, each night more restless. The bread grows thinner, the voices sharper, and the faces in the wine shop of the Defarges burn with a hunger deeper than food. Monsieur Defarge listens, his eyes fixed on the door as if expecting fate to walk through it at any moment. Madame Defarge sits at her post by the window, her knitting needles flashing like steel in candlelight. Every loop, every knot, is another name bound to vengeance. Her hands never falter and her gaze never warms. One afternoon the street outside erupts with shouts. A cask of wine is burst and the people spill into the gutter as though the ground itself were a chalice. They scoop it in their hands in broken pieces of pottery, even lapping it straight from the stones. Children giggle with red-stained lips, men roar like beasts, drunk before they have swallowed a mouthful. A smear of wine streaks across a wall, and someone scrawls a word with their finger. blood. The laughter dies into silence, and a tremor passes through the crowd. They look at one another with eyes that glint in shadow. It is a vision of what is to come, as though the city itself has tasted the future. The Defarges stand watching, silent. To them, this frenzy is not madness but prophecy. They know the cask is only the beginning. Not long after, the Bastille looms in their path. For generations, the fortress has brooded over Paris, its walls fat with misery, its stones echoing with despair. On this July day, the crowd gathers like a thundercloud. Bells ring, muskets flash, cannon throb, and a tide of people presses against the gates. The Bastille roars back, its guards firing into the mass, but the mass does not break. Men scramble up ladders, hurl stones, claw at chains. Smoke chokes the sky. Hours grind by in a frenzy of fire and cries until, at last, the fortress shudders and falls. Its gates are torn open, its prisoners stagger out like shades from the underworld, blinking into a light they never thought to see again. Monsieur Defarge pushes through the ruin, demanding the records, the registers, the secrets of who was imprisoned and why. His voice is not for today's vengeance, but tomorrow's. He wants names, evidence, the soil in which to plant justice. He leads a chosen few into the dark corridors where iron still clings to stone. In a cell marked 105 North Tower, he lingers. It is the cell where Dr. Manette once lived his long death. He stands in the echo of the old shoemaker's rasp and feels the silence of the man who was buried alive here. That silence becomes a vow. The Bastille has fallen, but its ghosts are not gone. Madame Defarge, outside, watches heads on pikes parade through the streets. The women shriek with triumph, the men bellow songs of liberty, and children dance in gutters bright with gore. Yet her eyes remain cold, her needle steady. The storm has broken, but she is not yet satisfied. She is not fighting for liberty alone. She is fighting for revenge, and her register has many names still unwritten. Across the Channel, London listens uneasily. The news of the Bastille spreads like smoke through taverns and salons. Some cheer, others shudder. In the Manette home, the tidings fall with the weight of prophecy. Dr. Manette grows silent when he hears it, staring into a place only he can see, a place of damp walls and iron hinges. Lucie feels his hand tremble in hers, and she presses it firmly, whispering him back to the present. Charles Darnay listens too, the shadow of his family name pressing hard against his peace. The Evremond blood is a chain he thought broken, but the storm across the sea is gathering its links, and soon it will reach for him. Sydney Carton, in his solitary way, hears the same tidings and drinks longer, staring at nothing, as though measuring the length of a shadow. Yet even in his despair there flickers a sense of alignment, as though the storm that consumes a city will one day call him to his single act of grace. He cannot name it, but it walks beside him like a twin he has not yet met. In Paris, the wine shop becomes the heart of a movement. Knots of men lean close at its tables, voices low, faces lit by the flame of wrath. Madame Defarge writes her register not only in wool but in whispers, knitting names into the ears of those who will not forget. When she finishes one pattern, she begins another, her hands tireless. The people look to her as to an oracle, a woman who never laughs, never cries, but always remembers. The revolution has begun. Its wine is blood, its bread is vengeance, its song is the thunder of marching feet. The Bastille has fallen, but the guillotine waits, hungry and patient, its blade not yet named but already sharpened by the will of the crowd. And in London, Lucie rocks her child to sleep, her voice soft against the pulse of approaching footsteps. The night is still, but the air seems charged, as though it carries an echo across the sea. The echo of drums, of cries, of stone breaking under fury. Soon what happens in Paris will not stay in Paris, For a long, merciful season, life in Soho arranges itself like a gentle melody played at dusk. The plane tree in the courtyard sways through warm evenings and pale winters, and the rooms of the Manette house learn to hold a steady light. Dr. Manette's step grows sure again. The tremor in his hands fades until it is no more than a remembered ripple passing through still water. He keeps his shoemaker's craft only in memory now, a relic he honors by never touching. When he leans to kiss his daughter's hair or stoops to gather his grandchild into his arms, there is nothing behind his eyes but the present. Charles works with quiet dignity, building a life not from inherited privilege but from patient days. Lessons prepared, students taught, translations inked by candlelight after the house is sleeping. He moves through each hour with gratitude that feels like breath. In the space he shares with Lucie, there is no sharpness, only the tenuous luxury of ordinary happiness. A cup refilled, a shawl laid over a chair back, a book left open where the last thought paused for morning. The child, little Lucie, grows like dawn widening. She laughs with her whole body, and when she runs from room to room, she leaves a trail of silver sound that even the city seems to soften to hear. Sometimes the family walks beneath the plane tree while London hums a comfortable background. Iron on stone, street vendors calling, carriage wheels tidily turning. Mr. Lorry visits often, a gentlemanly constant carrying with him the atmosphere of Tellson's, an old bank with a face like a locked door and a heart like a loyal servant. Miss Pross keeps order with thunderous affection, insisting that no foreigner, by which she means any person not herself, could possibly care for her ladybird as she does, then bustling off to fetch cakes for the very foreigners she has just decried. Sydney Carton appears in this world of brightness like evening entering a sunlit room. Soft, inevitable, shadowed. He does not intrude. He simply takes a chair at the edge of the firelight and becomes over time part of the house's breathing. He speaks little, though when he does, the words are exact, like well-cut stones placed where the path narrows. He never stays late. He never comes expecting to be asked back, and yet he is asked back, because even Miss Pross, who distrusts all clouds on principle, cannot deny the way the child lifts her arms toward him. Little Lucie climbs into his lap without hesitation and smooths his hair with small, solemn hands as if patting down a storm. In such moments, a gentleness he thought he had forfeited returns to Carton like warmth, rediscovering a cooled stone. He watches Lucie and Charles share a look over the child's head, a look in which home and future seal themselves to each other. And his face does not twist as it used to. Something has replaced envy. Perhaps acceptance, perhaps a private vow that if tested will burn white and sure. Often he lingers at the threshold when he leaves, the street lamps throwing bars of light across the pavement. He stands just long enough to notice how the glow from the Manette windows falls in a square on the road, a shape like an open door even after the latch has clicked. On a summer afternoon, the house fills with visitors, the kind Lucie calls footsteps. She hears them in memory long after the voices fade, friends and acquaintances, small kindnesses carried in, small sorrows left behind. The city itself seems to walk through their rooms, a clerk with ink-stained fingers grateful for advice, a widowed neighbor borrowing courage, a frightened apprentice reassured by the doctor's certainty that pain passes. No one is turned away. The house receives each life as rain receives dust. There are shadows because life without them is a painting without depth. A second child is born, a boy with a smile bright as a coin. And for a brief spell, laughter becomes almost reckless in the rooms. Then illness slips in as softly as evening, and the boy's light thins, flickers, and dims. They wrap him in all the love they own, and still he drifts away. After the plane tree's leaves seem to move in a slower language, Charles lifts little Lucie higher when he carries her. Lucie's song lowers by a note, The doctor sits longer by the window, not lost in his old cell, but seated beside a newer absence that hurts without unmaking him. The family does not speak of despair. Instead, they practice a crafted tenderness, a hand resting longer on a shoulder, a cup of tea placed where it is not requested, stories told softly at bedtime of stars that watch and seeds that sleep and return. In this season, Mr. Stryver, bombastic as ever, takes a pragmatic wife and congratulates himself into contentment. Jerry Cruncher, who runs errands for Tellson's and has a night trade he does not confess, shuffles in and out of the story like a rough punctuation mark. Barsad's name surfaces from time to time in the chancy talk of London taverns, a hint, a rumor, then sinks again, leaving only a ripple. The real movement, the truer danger, gathers far away, in the city that crowns every London headline and dreams into every London night. Paris. Word arrives in fragments that feel like weather updates from a distant storm. Monasteries emptied, noble households abandoned, taxes uncollected, a new assembly debating a new calendar for the world. At first, the news passes through the Manette rooms like wind through open curtains, a pricking coolness, nothing more. But over months, that wind turns, sharpens, begins to whine at the sash. Heads are mentioned, then blades, then processions and songs that drown the bells. Charles reads these reports with a care he does not parade. He has refused the Evremond inheritance and the evil it carried, but the name remains like an iron seed in the soil of his life. It sends up shoots where he cannot see, in fields he does not own. Lucie recognizes the caution in his hands when he folds the papers closed, the burnished patience with which he changes the subject. She answers it not with questions but with presence, her palm over his, her voice steady as a harbor light. Dr. Manette, hearing the same tidings, does not crumble. He grows still in a way that makes stillness itself look strong. He will not be conquered by echoes. He has chosen the living. On an evening of small rain, Carton walks with Mr. Lorry along the river. The water shoulders its way past the piers, indifferent and constant. Carton speaks of nothing consequential, and yet, by the weight of his voice, everything. He praises Mr. Lorry for the art of being useful without being hard, necessary without being proud. Lorry brushes the compliment aside, embarrassed, then studies Carton the way a craftsman studies a tool that has not yet found its proper task. "You are a good man," he says carefully. Carton's smile tilts. "I should like to be before I die." He ends some nights in his rooms with a glass and a ledger of self-reproach he has balanced so often it has no surprises left. But now, before he sleeps, he holds another image in mind. A little girl's hand on his cheek, her mother's voice lifting over her shoulder, the doctor standing at a window with his face unshadowed. He does not bargain for any of it. He merely keeps it safe as one keeps a flame cupped from the wind. And still the wind rises. From Paris come songs with the rhythm of marching. From Paris come letters written in a cramped, frightened hand. From Paris comes the sense, impossible to explain to those who have not felt it, that the future has started running and will not slow for the likes of ordinary love. One night after supper, the house seems to lean forward to listen. Even Miss Pross stops in mid-fuss. The footsteps Lucie once imagined sound almost real. Not on the stair, but on the road beyond, like an army at a distance. She draws nearer to her father without thinking. Charles's arm finds her waist without searching. The lamp crackles. The shadows tighten at the edges of the room, and the rain straightens into spears against the glass. Peace does not break. It narrows. The family learns to live inside it as in a delicate glass shape they must carry with both hands. Within that boundary, kindness continues. Lessons, songs, small celebrations. Old friends keep visiting. New ones return with babies or news or grief and are received with the same steadiness. But all of them, even the most cheerful, glance toward the window before they leave, as if measuring the weather for a journey they have not planned to take. When the evening settles at last and the house grows quiet, Carton stands again on the threshold. He looks once more at the familiar square of lamplight falling to the street, then turns his face toward the wind that smells faintly, impossibly, of foreign smoke. The time for promises made in private is moving nearer to the time for promises kept in public. He does not know how he knows this. He knows it as one knows the sea by the sound of it, long before it comes. It is no longer a city of whispers and clenched jaws, but of thunder, fire, and steel. On the 14th day of July, a river of men, women, and children surges through its narrow streets. They are armed with whatever their hands can find. Pikes, scythes, muskets stolen from soldiers who dared hesitate. They march with one heartbeat, their roar shaking window panes and rattling the teeth of nobles cowering behind shutters. All day the drums have beat, and now the crowd pours toward a hulking fortress of stone, the Bastille. The prison towers rise like a shadow over centuries, its walls thick with misery, its very stones heavy with the despair of thousands who vanished within. For years, the Bastille has been more than a prison. It has been a symbol, a beast squatting on the chest of Paris, and today the people mean to kill it. The first musket cracks. The gates shudder. Smoke thickens, acrid and choking, yet the tide does not falter. For 4 hours, Paris hurls itself against the fortress. Cannon bellow, bullets scythe the air, bodies fall, trampled into dust, but the crowd surges forward again and again. A flag rises, a gate splinters, and then, with a cry that splits the sky, the Bastille begins to fall. Monsieur Defarge is among the stormers, his face grim with purpose, his arms steady as he drives men forward. For him, this is not merely destruction, it is revelation. He leads a small band through shattered doors into the dark corridors. The smell of damp stone clings to the air, mixed with the iron stink of rusted chains. They search the rooms, break locks, free prisoners whose eyes blink like moles brought suddenly to sunlight. And then Defarge pauses before a narrow door marked 105 North Tower. He orders it opened. The cell gapes, cold and empty, but the dust remembers. In the corner stands a shoemaker's bench, rough, scarred by years of ceaseless work. Defarge touches it with reverence and rage, for this is the tomb where Alexandre Manette was buried alive. Here the doctor lost his name, his freedom, nearly his mind. Defarge had been his servant once. He remembers the gentle master. And now, in the ruins of tyranny, he claims this place as sacred. "Write it down," he says. "This cell, this number, this silence, let it be remembered when justice is done." Above, the mob parades the governor's head on a pike. Bells ring wild and ceaseless. Children dance in gutters smeared with blood. Women shriek songs of liberty until their throats tear. Men embrace one another with tears and laughter fierce as fire. And through it all, Madame Defarge stands calm, her needles clicking. She does not shout, she does not sing. She watches, her face set like stone, the wool slipping between her fingers, loop after loop. Each knot she ties is a name, each line an oath. Her vengeance is not noise, it is permanence. Back in London, the news spreads like lightning through clubs, taverns, drawing rooms. Some toast the fall of tyranny. Others shudder at the vision of chaos unchained. In the quiet house in Soho, Lucie reads the tidings with a furrowed brow. She cannot help but picture again the footsteps she always hears in imagination. Louder now, closer, like boots upon stone. Dr. Manette reads the same news with a silence that presses hard on his chest. He alone knows what it means to be swallowed alive by those walls. He alone understands what it means that those walls have crumbled. His hands shake slightly, but he places the paper aside and turns to his daughter with a smile that costs him effort but is real. "It is a new world, Lucie," he says softly. "We must hope it is a better one." Charles Darnay listens too, and the shadow of his name darkens the room. For while he has renounced the Evremond estate, the blood of that line still runs in him, and he knows that when the people turn their rage upon nobles, they will not stop to ask which hearts are guilty and which have rejected guilt. He does not speak this aloud, but Lucie sees it in the tension of his jaw. She lays her hand on his, grounding him to the life they have built in England. A life of honesty, love, and fragile peace. In Paris, peace is gone. The Bastille is rubble. The tricolor flutters over the city. Aristocrats flee in carriages at night, their wheels muffled with straw. Peasants set torches to manor houses, fields blaze as though the earth itself were aflame with vengeance. From village to village the fire spreads until France seems to be one long burning road, and still Madame Defarge knits. She records not only names but entire bloodlines, binding generations to a destiny of death. Her work grows longer, heavier. The register of vengeance is becoming a nation's scripture. The world has tilted. What fell in Paris will not stay in Paris. Across the Channel, London goes about its business, but the Manette's quiet home feels the tremor, as though its walls were made of glass. The footsteps Lucie hears are no longer distant. They are marching, steady, inescapable, echoing across sea and time. And when they arrive, they will carry more than revolution. They will carry the fate of her family. France does not merely change, it convulses. Streets that once hummed with commerce now ring with drums and slogans. Doors that once closed against chill air now slam against fear. The old world has cracked open like a shell, and the thing that crawls from it calls itself justice. In the squares, a tall wooden frame rises where fountains used to be. They name its blade with a kind of awe, as if it were a stern angel descended to separate the living from the dead. Women sit and knit beneath it as calmly as if beneath a chestnut tree. Their needles keep time with the new age. One of them almost never smiles. Madame Defarge counts by loops rather than minutes, and in the arithmetic of her hands, names become sentences. Across the Channel, the Manette home still shelters its small rituals. But the news that blows in with each letter is a colder wind. Charles reads, folds, reads again. Then a single message proves stronger than caution. A letter smuggled from a French prison by a man who once managed the Evremond estate. Gabelle writes in a cramped, desperate hand. He insists he remained only to protect the people, to keep the village from starvation. For this, the patriots have branded him a traitor to the people and thrown him into a cell. He begs help from the only Evremond who ever tried to do right by the poor, the one who renounced his title, who crossed the sea, who has lived honestly. He believes that if that man comes and speaks, these new courts that praise reason will hear reason. He believes it because he must. Charles sits for a long time after finishing. The lamp smokes. The room seems to narrow around his breath. To be born into a name is to be born into a debt, and he has spent years paying it by living decently, by keeping hands clean that were not always clean in generations before him. But here is a bill he cannot discharge from England. A man suffers because of a history that Charles has tried to lay down. He cannot bear to let him suffer alone. He decides quietly, as men decide when the choice is not between danger and safety, but between shame and the inability to look at oneself in a mirror. He writes 2 letters, one to Lucie, one to Dr. Manette, explaining that he must go to France, that he will be careful, that the revolution needs to know who he is not as much as who he is. He believes because he has to, that the renunciation he once made will shield him. He leaves them sealed, for he cannot trust his voice to say it aloud. Without asking to be stopped, before dawn he takes his passport and steps into a journey that already has bars in it. At the coast he boards a packet boat, a tired vessel whose sails smell of old salt and hurried departures. The water heaves beneath a leaden sky, gulls wheel. Men trade rumors like contraband. When France comes into view, a line of gray shore against gray water, Charles feels the hinge turn. On the road inland, the first barrier appears, a post of the new guard with tricolor cockades and a hunger for proof. The old titles are now crimes, the old alliances death warrants. Charles presents his papers and his renunciation. He offers his purpose as one offers a hand. In return, he receives suspicion. "Citizen," they say, testing the word on him as if it were a blade. He is detained for a night in a small, sour room while messengers query the nearest committee. He is released with a guard. He travels on, not as a free man, but as an escorted problem. So it goes. Village after village, barrier after barrier, questions asked with muskets leaning nearby. He sees blackened rectangles where chateaux once stood, fields stripped bare, churches with their bells silenced and their altars stripped. The air tastes of smoke and iron. Where the road dips toward towns, he hears the new songs. Fierce refrains that stamp their rhythm into the earth, and sees men dancing a jerking circle dance around bonfires as if stamping out anything soft that might have survived inside them. Children watch with bright, hungry eyes. Old women spit into the dust when they hear the name Evremont. He tries to explain. He tells them he is not that name. He tells them that the man he comes to help is no aristocrat fattened on sweat, but a caretaker who dared remain for the sake of those left behind. He says he paid for the sins of others by refusing their inheritance. The words, once true enough to make a life, now clang like coins that will not spend. The France he is traveling belongs to committees and to crowds. A man's private virtue does not mean what it used to mean when crowds judge. By the time Paris rises, smoky and vast, he is weary with argument and escorted by 3 patriots who hardly blink. Even so, he does not hide. He goes to the proper office. He announces himself, his purpose, his English home, his wife and child, his father-in-law who suffered 18 years in the Bastille and has the number to prove it. The clerk hears Evremond and stops writing. Men confer. A door opens. Another closes. The word emigrant is said like a condemnation. He is informed that, as one of those formerly of the nobility returning to France, his liberty is forfeit until the people decide what he is. This is how it happens. Not with a trial or a speech, but with a hand on his shoulder and a quiet direction to follow. He is conducted through streets that shout, "Liberty!" and into a prison with a name that sounds like a promise but is a gray mouth. La Force. The great door groans behind him. He is led down a corridor where the stones are slick with life surrendered. He is placed in a cell with a bed he does not sit upon and a window that does not open. A guard tells him he is held in secret. The words close the room like mortar. For a while he tries to steady his thoughts by counting what he loves. Lucie's hand wrapping his, the way little Lucie's hair smells of bread when she has been sleeping, the way Dr. Manette's voice has learned peace by practicing it, the square of lamplight that falls into the street from their windows at night. He recites these as men recite prayers learned in simpler times. They do not open the door. Outside, Paris drags justice from house to house on carts and calls it transport. The courts multiply. Judges proclaim themselves instruments rather than minds. New laws are written quicker than the ink can dry. Old laws are burned quicker than the ink can smoke. At the corners, posters announce decrees that narrow the future to a blade's edge. The people stand and read, then turn and shout approval because to hesitate is to declare oneself against the people. In a quieter street not far from the great river, an ancient building houses Tellson's Bank in its Paris branch. The same iron discretion, the same odor of dust and gold, the same belief that endurance is a virtue. Mr. Lorry has come to safeguard what can be saved. papers, credits, the fragile continuities of trust. He works from dawn until candles gutter, moving accounts as if they were refugees to be smuggled across invisible borders. He is there when a shaken messenger brings the news that a certain Englishman arrived in hope has been taken to La Force. He puts down his pen, not because he means to do less, but because he means to do more. He does not yet know that the man in La Force is the son-in-law of the friend he loves. He will know soon, and he will stay because he is a man who does not abandon his post when the city around him does. In Soho, 2 sealed letters wait until evening. Lucie breaks hers with a steady hand and reads it standing, as if sitting might deny the seriousness that steadiness requires. She does not cry at first. She folds the paper back to the crease Charles made when he hesitated to write it. Then the tears come, and after them something more dangerous than tears: resolve. The second letter tells the doctor everything. When he finishes, he does not sway. 18 years taught him the pace of horror. Love has taught him the grammar of action. He looks at his bench, the ghost of it, and then past it to his daughter's face. "We will go," he says simply. "I am known there. I can help him." In Paris, in La Force, Charles lies on a hard bed and listens. In the muffled distance, the city roars and sings. Closer, the corridor breathes. Keys turn. Footsteps stop and move and stop again. He thinks of the plane tree and of a certain square of lamplight falling to the road, and then he does the most courageous thing he can do while locked in a room no larger than despair. He sleeps, storing strength for a day he cannot yet see. The city of Paris is a furnace now, glowing with the fire of vengeance and fed by the endless fuel of fear. In the streets, the guillotine rises not as an instrument of law, but as the altar of a new faith. Crowds gather at dawn, men with muskets, women with baskets of knitting, children perched on shoulders to see the blade fall. Heads roll and the people cheer as though each execution were a harvest, feeding a hunger that never shrinks. Terror is no longer an accident, it is the policy of the state. In this storm, the Manettes arrive. Mr. Lorry, stalwart in his Paris branch of Tellson's Bank, receives them with relief and quiet alarm. He learns that Charles Darnay, Evrémonde by birth, husband by love, lies in La Force, imprisoned in secret. When Lucie hears the name of the prison, her face whitens, but she stands firm, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on her father. Dr. Manette, trembling yet resolute, declares he will be the voice to save his son-in-law. 18 years in the Bastille, he says, are not forgotten. The people know me, my suffering is my strength. True enough, his name carries weight. He walks into the tribunal chambers not as a supplicant, but as one who has bled under tyranny. When he speaks of his time in the North Tower, heads bow, hands clap shoulders, voices murmur, a true sufferer. In this new republic, where every citizen is measured by what they have endured for the people, Dr. Manette is a kind of saint. And he wields that sainthood not for himself, but for Charles. He pleads, argues, persuades, reminding them that the man they hold renounced the blood of nobles, that he is no enemy but an honest exile, a teacher in London, a husband and father. The tribunal, swayed by the living testimony of a ghost resurrected, releases Charles Darnay from La Force. The reunion is almost unbearable in its tenderness. Lucie, trembling, lays her cheek against her husband's as if to prove by touch that life still beats in him. Little Lucie clings to his knees, too young to understand the shadow that brushed so close but wise enough to fear its cold. Even Sydney Carton, who has followed them into France with a silence no one thought to question, stands at a distance and feels something unclench in his chest. For once, the world has spared a man he loves, but Paris is not a city where victories last. Barely have the Manettes tasted relief when whispers coil through the streets again. Charles Evrémonde has been freed, yes, but he is still an émigré, one of the cursed who fled and dared to return. His name, once spoken, spreads like smoke in Madame Defarge's wine shop. Her knitting needles strike faster, her eyes gleam sharper. She remembers a story from long ago of a sister dishonored, a family destroyed by the cruelty of the Evremonde. She remembers a child, her blood, erased by noble arrogance. And when she thinks of that name, she does not see a gentle teacher in London. She sees every ancestor who ground her people into dust. She sees vengeance unfinished. Thus begins the web of vengeance. While Dr. Manette marshals his influence to hold the tribunal's mercy, Madame Defarge and her circle of tricoteuses weave a darker verdict. They sit in the shadow of the guillotine, recording not only crimes but entire bloodlines. The Evremonde name must die, Madame Defarge says, her lips scarcely moving, her needles clicking faster. And when she ties off the thread, she ties Charles Darnay's fate into the very pattern of the revolution. At Tellson's in Paris, Mr. Lorry works late, his spectacles fogged by candle smoke, his heart sore with worry. He does not see the door open until a figure slips in, Barsad, the spy. Once despised as a traitor, he now wears the cockade of a patriot, changing allegiance as easily as a man changes coats. Mr. Lorry, aghast, curses the day he ever let such a snake cross his path. But another voice, low and level, interrupts. Sydney Carton steps forward from the corner, his eyes shadowed but sharp. "Let him stay," Carton says. "We may yet need him." Carton knows a spy when he sees one, and he knows the value of men who live by treachery. They can be bought, they can be frightened, and they can be turned. He studies Barsad with an intensity that makes the man squirm. In Carton's weary gaze there is something new, not despair, not bitterness, but calculation. He has begun to measure the cost of redemption, and he knows already it must be paid in coin heavier than gold. In the Manette household, Lucie lives in dread of the tribunal's recall. She dares not speak her fear aloud, but at night she hears the roll of drums and the heavy tread of soldiers in her dreams. When she wakes, she listens for footsteps outside, not the imagined ones she once called guests, but the very real march of men coming for her husband. She keeps a vigil by the window, whispering prayers into the Paris night, while Charles holds her hand and tries to believe the storm will pass them by. But storms in Paris do not pass. They gather, they return, and they strike again with sharper thunder. Soon the tribunal will call Darnay once more. Soon the knitting needles will stop clicking, for the sentence will already be written. The knock comes at night, the kind that does not ask permission so much as remind a household of the world outside its walls. Drums mutter somewhere in the city, boots grind in the stairwell, and when the door opens, the tricolor cockades are already speaking. Charles Darnay, freed but not forgiven, looks once at Lucie and understands before the words arrive. Rearrested by order of the section of Saint Antoine on denunciation newly lodged, he takes his coat. Lucie takes his hand. The officer looks at their fingers, then away, as if mercy were a contagious weakness. The door closes on a cry the neighbors will pretend not to have heard. Paris has remembered the name he tried to renounce. The tribunal's parchment is only ink. The true decree is written in the pulse of the streets. Charles returns to prison. This time the conciergerie gray and wet, where the city keeps those who are about to be judged or are merely waiting to die. The rooms sweat salt. The corridors breathe. The river, broad and indifferent just beyond, moves like a clock that cannot be hurried. Dr. Manette refuses despair as if it were a second captivity. He will not sit or weep. He will work. He goes into the prisons with the authority of a man who has survived the North Tower and come back bearing its number in his bones. "I am a physician," he says at every gate. "I am a citizen. I have suffered for the people." Doors that would never open for a plea open for that sentence. He dresses wounds, eases fevers, fixes his gaze on the lives in front of him until even the jailers make way. In the narrow economy of terror, he spends his sainthood like coin. All of it, if that is what it costs. Everywhere he goes, he speaks Charles's truth. A man of work, an enemy of his own blood's pride. Smiles meet him. Hands pledge him their small power. Courage, citizen doctor, courage. Lucie learns a discipline of waiting that could be mistaken for prayer. Each day at a certain hour, she stands beneath a window that faces the prison yard, a little out of the way where the soldiers will not mind her stillness. On the stone opposite works a wood sawyer whose blade chews steadily through billets. He calls his saw little guillotine and bows to Lucie with grotesque courtly flourish, tipping his cap to the invisible blade between them. Sometimes he sings the carmagnole while he cuts, wagging his head to the chorus like a puppet. Sometimes he is silent and watches her with eyes too bright. On a day of pale winter sunlight, Charles crosses the yard with a file of prisoners. He is thinner than he was, but not broken. Lucie presses her fingers to her lips and lifts her hand a little. Not a wave, not a signal, only the smallest human greeting, and he inclines his head almost imperceptibly as if a breeze had moved it. The wood sawyer's laugh cracks like kindling. "Ah, pretty citizen, pretty pity, signals for prisoners, naughty, naughty." The next day, two women come to stand beside him with their knitting, and Lucie holds herself still until the hour ends, her hands folded at her breast, every muscle a sentence of restraint. Madame Defarge visits her once, gliding into the small rooms like winter. Her face is a calm mask. Her needles are their own speech. "The Republic is merciful to the innocent," she says, "and terrible to the guilty." She looks at Lucie's child without softness and at Lucie's wedding ring without change. "Take care you are not seen," she adds, making signs to a prisoner. Her eyes rest on Lucie's heart as if measuring where to place the blade. Miss Pross stands behind her like a red-faced fortress and says nothing, because speech would be a weapon, and weapons must be saved for the right hour. At Tellson's, Mr. Lorry works the way a man bails a listing ship, steady, soaked to the bone, thinking only of the next bucket. He receives visitors with a courtesy that refuses to be frightened, keeps accounts as if numbers might yet be an argument against the flood. Sydney Carton is often there now, pale with too little sleep, his hair untidy, his eyes sober as iron. He disappears for hours and returns with the smell of the streets on him, and a look Mr. Lorry has never seen before. Not despair, not even resolve, but a kind of quiet that suggests a door has opened inside him and he has already stepped through it. Barsad, the spy, comes again when called, because men like Barsad come when called by anyone who knows where their skeletons lie. Carton names those skeletons softly: the forged coin, the treachery in England, the alias that is not an alias at all, Solomon Pross. At the sound of his true name, the man flinches as if struck, Miss Pross's brother unworthy of her smallest kindness. Carton does not raise his voice. He simply offers a choice: assist, truly assist, or be denounced and taken to the embrace of the knitting women. Barsad swallows and nods. A rope has been lowered. He will climb whichever end is handed to him. The second trial comes with a speed that makes a mockery of preparation. The court is a theater of hunger. Red caps, cockades, musket butts ringing on the floor. Charles stands once more before judges who wear virtue like armor and look upon pity as a counter-revolutionary act. Dr. Manette testifies, and his story of captivity draws murmurs of reverence from the packed room. For a moment the old saint's light appears to scatter the crows. He speaks of Charles's renunciation, of his labor in England, of his character. Heads nod. Hope tilts its face up to consider the sky. Then the court calls the keepers of the Bastille's secrets, the men who tore open the fallen fortress and carried out its records like relics. Among those papers, they say, a letter written in a small controlled hand was found, sealed and hidden deep in a wall of the North Tower in a cell called 105. A letter by a physician named Alexandre Manette. He is stone. The room seems to draw away from him. The coat on his shoulders turns heavy as iron. They break the seal and read in a voice that swallows its own horror. The letter tells of two noble brothers who came by night with swords and laughter that could not hear another's suffering. Of a peasant boy dying by inches from the wounds they gave him. Of a young peasant woman, beautiful and breaking, carried off and returned senseless, her hair torn, her spirit gone to where no one could reach it. Of an old father who died of the telling. It tells of a baby sister spirited away by friends before the noble's men could find her. The last ember of a household stamped underfoot. It tells of a doctor summoned to tend the victims who wrote to authorities and was answered with darkness. A warrant drawn by the hand of an Evrémonde and carried to the door of the physician who dared to say this is wrong. It tells of chains and straw and the long night of the North Tower. It ends with a curse, not shouted but traced like acid. That he, Alexandre Manette, denounces the house of Evrémonde, all its heirs and descendants, to the judgment of the people. That they may never go unpunished. For a few breaths no one moves. The letter lies on the table like a blade still humming from the stroke. Dr. Manette's lips shape a word that makes no sound. Lucie's hands lock together until the knuckles pale. Charles closes his eyes and opens them again, as if sight were something that must be chosen each time. Madame Defarge sits very straight, her knitting quiet on her lap, her gaze as steady as a gun barrel trained from a second-story window. The judges call for any who can attest to the suffering named in the letter. Monsieur Defarge steps forward and speaks of the cell, of the bench, of the shoemaker's ghost that made shoes to keep from breaking. Then Madame Defarge rises and gives them what they crave, the bridge between the old sin and the living present. She tells them her maiden name with a voice that does not tremble. She tells them the field and the village and the family erased. She is kin to the dead. She is the sister spared by chance and by courage. She points not at Charles's actions, there are none to accuse, but at his blood. In this room blood is evidence enough. Dr. Manette pleads then like a man arguing with the sea. He declares that the letter was written by a prisoner maddened by injustice, that he recalls its words as one recalls a fever's ravings. He insists that he has forgiven, that the son must not be arraigned under the father's shadow, that the republic must be nobler than the tyrants it overthrew. He speaks until his voice frays. But the court has found a scripture, and scriptures are not easily set aside. The verdict is a single word shouted by many mouths: death. The blade within the word is swift and clean. The crowd erupts, hats flung, feet stamping, the carmagnole rioting through the hall until the walls seem to dance. A woman in the corner knits faster, as if racing to catch the sound and bind it into thread. Charles bows his head once, a gesture almost courteous, as if acknowledging a partner at a dance. Lucie sways, and Mr. Lorry's arms are already there. Dr. Manette does not fall. He stands very straight, pupils blown wide as if the room had darkened. "I will save him," he says to no one and to everyone. "I will go to those who owe me the debt of memory. I will save him." He leaves the court walking quickly, the crowd parting before him as they would for a flame. Sydney Carton does not move for several heartbeats. The shout of death folds itself and folds again inside him until it is small enough to carry. Then he turns and is gone. A plan that has been looking for him all his life has finally found him. Night folds around Paris, thick with smoke from 100 hearths and the heavy scent of fear. In the conciergerie, Charles Darnay lies awake on the straw of his cell. The sentence has been spoken. Death. Not a word, not an idea, but a date already whispered among the guards. He counts time by the scrape of footsteps in the corridor, by the drip of water down the stones, by the faint murmur of the river that slides beyond the walls as if nothing in the world has changed. He thinks of Lucie's face pressed white against the glass, of her father's hands trembling with a courage that could not shield him, of his little girl's laugh. He closes his eyes not to dream, but to fix these images so deeply that even death will not take them from him. In Tellson's Paris office, the lamps burn late. Mr. Lorry sits bent over papers, though the words blur, his old heart racked by grief. Beside him, Sydney Carton leans in shadow, his untidy hair loose, his eyes oddly clear. He has listened, asked little, walked the streets with the measured pace of a man who has chosen his road. Now he stands and his voice carries the quiet of finality. "Tomorrow," he says, "we must see Barsad." John Barsad comes like all spies come when cornered, with a mixture of swagger and sweat. Carton does not raise his tone, he only speaks his knowledge with surgical precision. He names the lies told in England, the betrayals, the false oaths. He names the one truth Barsad cannot deny. His birth name, Solomon Pross. The sound of it cuts the man deeper than any accusation. Miss Pross's brother, the shame of her life, unmasked in the city of vengeance. Barsad sputters, threatens, bargains, but Carton has already shifted the ground beneath him. "You will help me," Carton says, "or the knitting women will have your name by morning." Barsad looks into Carton's eyes and finds no plea there, no jest, only inevitability. He nods. The plan begins to breathe, begins to... Carton spends the night walking the streets of Paris. He does not drink. He does not speak to anyone. He walks past taverns loud with songs of the Carmagnole, past lamplight glinting off bayonets stacked like harvest, past women dancing with blood in their eyes. The guillotine waits in the square, a silhouette against the stars, its blade catching a faint gleam as though the moon had sharpened it. Carton stops and looks at it as a man looks at a mirror. His face is reflected in that steel, and for the first time he does not turn away. The next day he visits Lucie. The guards allow it, for even in terror the semblance of mercy lingers. He enters quietly and Lucie rises, her eyes swollen from tears but her bearing still gentle. She takes his hand as though it is an anchor. He does not let her speak apologies or despair. He only tells her to have courage, to believe in rescue. He bends to little Lucie, who clings to him with a trust that pierces his heart. "You must remember me," he whispers to the child, "always as one who loved you and loved those you love. Hold me in your prayers and I will be near." The girl presses her cheek to his and Carton holds still as if to seal the moment into eternity. When Lucie falters, Carton steadies her. "Think now of your husband. Let him see your face bright with hope, not broken by grief. He must go to his death believing his family is safe, believing they will live. You must promise me this." She promises, though her voice trembles like a candle flame in wind. Carton presses her hand once more and steps back. In her eyes he sees not only sorrow but recognition, the faint glimmer that she knows what he intends, though she dares not name it. That evening Carton and Barsad move with the tide of people around the prison. Through whispered words, bribes, and the threat of exposure, Barsad makes the arrangements. A visitor is to be admitted to Darnay's cell, Sydney Carton himself. The jailers notice nothing beyond the likeness of the two men. The same height, the same hair, the same cast of face, as though destiny had carved one mold for two souls and filled it differently. Inside the cell, Charles starts with shock when he sees Carton. "You? Here," he whispers. Carton lays a hand on his shoulder. "Be still. Listen to me." Charles protests, but Carton's voice cuts through with a firmness it has never held before. "You have a wife who adores you. You have a child who needs you. You have a life still worth living. And I..." He pauses, searching for the words that will not sound like despair. "I have wasted mine. This is the one thing that will make it mean something. Let me do this for her, for you. Before Charles can resist, Carton presses a draft upon him, prepared in secret. It is quick, merciful. Darnay sinks into unconsciousness, his head bowing as if in simple sleep. Carton strips away his own outer clothes, exchanges them with the prisoner, arranges the hair, the cravat, the coat. When the guards return, they see only a man dazed from captivity, too weak to resist. They lift him, carry him away, believing they are delivering Charles Evremond to his family for a final farewell. In the cell, Sydney Carton sits in the silence Charles has left. He closes his eyes and breathes in the damp air. Steady, steady. He thinks of Lucie's voice, of the child's hand upon his cheek, of a promise made in a summer evening long ago beneath the plane tree, that he would give his life for those she loved. He has reached the hour when promises must become flesh. He feels no fear, only a strange, profound calm, as though his whole wasted life has been a preparation for this one act. The dawn outside grows pale and Paris stirs with anticipation. Crowds begin to gather, drums beat their slow march, and the guillotine waits, hungry, gleaming in the first light. Sydney Carton, unrecognized, stands when called, ready to walk the road that will carry him not to despair, but to the far, far better thing he has ever dreamed of doing. Morning gathers on Paris like a drumbeat, slow at first, then certain. In the conciergerie, a line forms. Men and women marked for the day's harvest, each given a number as if the blade were an appointment. Sydney Carton stands among them, hair combed as Charles's would be, collar straight, face calm. No one notices the difference because the city no longer sees faces, it sees sentences. Beside him, a young seamstress lifts her eyes. She is small and terribly composed, as if she has practiced serenity the way others practice scales. She studies Carton for a quiet moment, and then, with a courage too gentle to be theatrical, she leans closer. "You are not the one," her eyes say more than her lips dare. He meets that gaze and answers with the smallest nod, a confession offered only to a soul who will not wound it. "It is a good thing you do," she whispers. "Hold my hand at the last?" He offers it now. Their fingers lace, an oath that needs no ink. Outside, the carts rattle forward. The crowds arrive the way birds do when seed is thrown, filling the square, perching on every sill and scaffold. Women in bright caps settle to their knitting as if to a favorite chair. Children eat apples and point at the wagons. Men sing the carmagnole with a vigor that shakes the air. The guillotine rises clean and geometric against the pale sky, its angled blade glimmering like a cold smile. Paris has made itself a liturgy, and this machine is its altar. The cart jolts. Streets slide by in a procession of alleys and faces. Carton keeps the seamstress's hand, and in the rhythm of the wheels he counts backward, not from fear but from the measure of all that still must happen while he breathes. Somewhere not many streets away, another part of the plan unfolds with the simplicity of courage. Mr. Lorry, his coat buttoned high, sees Lucie, the child, Dr. Manette, and the dazed, half-swooning servant who has been carried to the coach. Safely within. The papers are in order. The passport bears a lie written by necessity and smoothed by money. At the barrier, Carton had said the night before, "Be only what you seem, and let haste be your eloquence." Mr. Lorry, who has done brave things before without noticing they were brave, answers by doing exactly as told. The coach lurches into motion. At the first post, a sentry with a red cap and redder eyes jams his head through the window, fingers already greedy for a reason to stop them. "Names?" Mr. Lorry recites. "Business?" "We travel to join family." "To flee?" "To obey the decrees, citizen." A pause. The man's stare moves like a knife over the sleeping figure slumped in the opposite corner. his features still Charles's but softened by the draft into harmlessness. "He is ill," Lucie says, and for once her voice does not tremble. The sentry shrugs, yawns, waves them on. Wheels bite gravel again. Another mile is eaten. In the second cart, Carton watches the city pass. A stall where once a boy sold oranges now patched over with tricolor cloth. A door he remembers from a life he never lived marked with the sign of a revolutionary committee. A window where a woman with sharp eyes counts prisoners like stitches. Madame Defarge is not here, but her absence is a presence. Her knitting has become the city's memory. It will not forget what it has decided to know. The line of carts pauses at a square where the air smells of tallow and iron. The seamstress leans into him, not from panic, but from a need to steady her small body against the crowd's noise. "I am afraid of pain," she says simply. "But I am not afraid of the end." Carton answers softly, almost to himself, that the end is not a wall but a door, and doors open. He tells her of a quiet country he once saw by accident. Green fields, a river like a silver thread, a road that went on and on without turning cruel. He speaks it into the air as if sketching a path they will later take. The girl breathes more easily. She thanks him. No one else hears. There is too much singing. There, at another barrier, the coach bearing those he loves jolts to a halt again. A new officer circles it with theatrical suspicion. English? Yes. Sympathies? With order. With whom? With bread and sleep. The officer laughs. He has heard too many lies to resist one that is shaped like modesty, and stamps their paper. Mr. Lorry does not look back. Dr. Manette sits rigid, hands clenched upon his knees. He is a man walking a corridor he once left, refusing every door that might let darkness in. Lucie's palm stays on Charles's chest, measuring a heart that is slow for the first time from mercy and not from fear. "Breathe," she whispers. "Breathe for us." The child peers over the lap blanket and, seeing the face she calls father, smiles with a secret she cannot pronounce. The horses leap into the traces again as if they too have promises to keep. The carts reach the final approach. The square opens. The blade glints. A name is called. A man mounts the steps. A shout rises, falls, is repeated. The world reduces to a staircase and the few feet of sky above it. Carton and the seamstress stand. Her small hand tightens in his. "Will it be long?" she asks, not pleading, only wishing to approach the last moment with knowledge. "No," he says, and it is the kindest truth. "Hold my hand until they take it, and then hold your courage." They move together. The knitting women glance up, register 2 more figures, and return to their work. A tumbril creaks. The blade thuds once in practice. A murmur rolls through the crowd like wind across grain. On the scaffold, the seamstress turns to him. "Let me kiss you," she says simply. "You, a stranger who are a good friend." She places her lips to his cheek with a gratefulness that has the shape of benediction. When they separate, neither cries. A guard gestures. She goes first. Her steps are small and even. Carton looks neither away nor down. The sound is quick. The crowd approves. The knitting resumes. He mounts. The city tilts back like a stage revealing its audience. Hungry faces, angry faces, indifferent faces, countless eyes that will forget his shape and keep only the number. He does not speak to them. He speaks to a place inside himself where the plane tree in Soho still lisps in summer light, where a child's hand rests on his jaw with grave affection, where Lucie's voice threads through rooms gathering the day into peace. He sees a door opening, not the one beneath his feet, another. Through it he watches a carriage fly along white roads. He watches a boarder intone its questions and then swallow the travelers as freedom. He watches a little house in a foreign city where a man, still weak, sits with his wife and whispers a prayer over their sleeping child. He sees Mr. Lorry at last fold his hands after a lifetime of usefulness and discover that rest, when earned, is not emptiness, but blessing. He sees Dr. Manette look at his daughter and find that the number which once named his cell has been replaced by another number, the days of untroubled mornings he is allowed, and that this arithmetic at last is mercy. He sees further. Years unwrap. A boy grows tall and thoughtful and is told why he bears the name he bears, Sydney. He watches that boy choose kindness as if it were a profession. He sees Lucie's hair touched with silver and her eyes bright with the gratitude that never dims, because some debts do not burden. They steady. He sees Paris change its costume, then change it again, and finally grow tired of the theater of blood. The blade is hauled away. The squares learn other songs. The wine shops sell wine again. The wind in the square lifts for a moment, then stills. A hand touches his sleeve. He steps forward, serene as a man stepping into his own house after a long journey. He thinks, and the thought is not a sentence he recites, but a certainty that fills him like breath, that what he is doing is better than anything he has ever done, and the rest he is going to is gentler than any he has known. He bows his head. The blade falls fast, like mercy. The square exhales as the blade strikes home. Another head lifted, another name crossed off, another stitch tightened in Madame Defarge's endless knitting. The crowd roars and claps as though fed with bread and wine, not death. Yet beneath their noise something else lingers, the hush of a soul passing not in shame but in peace. Sydney Carton's body falls as though into silence, but his sacrifice ripples outward unseen, changing the lives of those he has saved. Far from the scaffold, a coach thunders across the open roads, its wheels biting into rutted mud, its horses driven hard. Inside sit the living, Lucie, pale but steadfast, clutching Charles, who stirs weakly beside her, their child curled into her lap. Dr. Manette staring forward with eyes that still hold shadows but now cling fiercely to the present, and Mr. Lorry tireless in his guardianship. They do not speak at first, for silence itself feels like a shield, as though to break it might summon pursuit. Only when Paris has vanished behind them and the fields stretch wide and dark does Lucie lean her cheek against Charles and breathe the smallest prayer of thanks. Charles opens his eyes and looks at her, dazed as if unsure whether he is awake. He sees her tears, their child's sleeping face, his father-in-law's trembling hand on his shoulder. Slowly the truth dawns. He is free, he is alive, and it has been purchased at a price he cannot bear to name. When Lucie whispers Sydney, his throat tightens. They do not speak further, but in their silence, gratitude and grief braid together into something eternal. Behind them, Paris devours itself. The revolution that promised liberty dances wildly into excess. The guillotine does not rest. It sings from dawn till dusk, consuming nobles, priests, merchants, peasants, even the very men and women who raised it. Robespierre's star rises, then falters. The same voices that condemned thousands will, in time, condemn him too. Madame Defarge's needles clack on, but even her vengeance finds no end. For vengeance is a hunger that cannot be satisfied. When she dies, sudden, violent, in a struggle with Miss Pross, who defended Lucie with a ferocity born of love, the knitting is left unfinished, the pattern broken. The revolution continues, but one of its fiercest furies has fallen silent. And yet, amid the terror, the memory of Sydney Carton glows like a hidden lamp. No official proclamation records his name, no monument is raised. But in the hearts of those he saved, he is not lost. In England, years later, a child grows strong and thoughtful, carrying his name, Sydney. The boy learns when he is old enough to understand of the man who gave his life so that his father might live. The boy walks with pride in the shadow of that name, shaping his steps to honor it. Dr. Manette, though scarred forever by his long captivity, finds a measure of peace at last. He has witnessed cruelty and despair beyond measure, but he has also witnessed a love so absolute it conquered death. In caring for his daughter and her family, he learns that survival need not mean merely enduring, it can mean healing. His voice, once trembling with memory, grows steady with hope. Mr. Lorry, faithful servant to Tellson's to the very end, lives long enough to see Lucie's family safe, their life renewed. When at last he lays down his duties, he does so with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has given his life to usefulness and found in it a nobility equal to kings. And Sydney Carton, wasted youth, squandered promise, lonely soul, lives on in the only way that matters. His last vision was no fevered dream. The generations to come remember his name. They carry his sacrifice in their veins like a second pulse. His act, born of love unspoken, redeems the years he thought were wasted. The revolution devours itself. The guillotine rusts. The squares of Paris learn to sing other songs. But somewhere in the stillness beyond words, Carton's final thought endures. That it is a far, far better thing he did than he had ever done, and a far, far better rest he goes to than he has ever known, 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 than he has